Ever heard of a philosopher who lived in a barrel, begged for a living, and told the most powerful man on earth to get out of his way? This isn't a joke. It's the real-life story of Diogenes of Sinope, the ultimate philosophical rebel of ancient Greece. Picture the bustling heart of ancient Athens. Amongst the grand temples and famous thinkers like Plato, one man stood out by rejecting everything they stood for. He chose a life of extreme simplicity, a life that was a constant, living critique of the society around him. This is the story of a man who searched for an honest man in broad daylight with a lit lantern, and his life is as fascinating as it is bizarre. Diogenes was born in Sinope, a Greek colony on the coast of the Black Sea. His early life wasn't exactly a quiet one. His father was a minter, responsible for making the city's coins, and both he and Diogenes were caught in a massive scandal. They were accused of debasing the currency, which basically means they were tampering with the coins. This crime got them banished, exiled from their home. For most, this would be a moment of utter disgrace. But for Diogenes, this public shame was the spark that ignited his philosophical journey. He saw it as a sign to challenge all conventions, not just the metal content of coins. Forced to leave his home, Diogenes made his way to Athens, the philosophical capital of the world. There, he encountered the teachings of Antisthenes, who was himself a student of the great Socrates. Antisthenes was the founder of a school of thought called Cynicism. The word cynic comes from the Greek word for dog, and it was a label they wore with pride. They believed in living a life that was simple, natural, and free from the corrupting desires for wealth, power, and social status. They were the original nonconformists. Diogenes didn't just adopt these ideas. He took them to their absolute extreme. He became the living embodiment of cynicism. He decided that virtue was the only true good, and to achieve it, he had to strip away everything society deemed important. He owned almost nothing. His home? A large ceramic jar, often called a barrel, right in the middle of the public marketplace. His only possessions were a simple cloak to wear, a staff to lean on, and a wooden bowl to drink from. And even that was too much. The story goes that one day, he saw a young boy drinking water by cupping his hands. Diogenes immediately threw his own bowl away, realizing he didn't even need that. His entire life was a performance, a piece of philosophical street theater designed to shock people out of their complacency. He deliberately broke every social rule to prove how arbitrary they were. In ancient Greece, it was considered extremely rude to eat in the marketplace. So, what did Diogenes do? He ate his meals right there, in front of everyone. When people criticized him for it, he'd reply, "Well, it was in the marketplace that I felt hungry." He had a comeback for everything. He would even urinate on people who insulted him, comparing them to dogs who deserved no better. He was a constant thorn in the side of the Athenian establishment, especially other philosophers. He had a particular rivalry with Plato. Plato was known for his lofty, abstract theories. He once famously defined a human as a featherless biped. The next day, Diogenes burst into Plato's academy, holding a plucked chicken, and announced, "Behold, I have brought you a man." This kind of stunt was typical for Diogenes. He used humor and shock to bring high-minded philosophy crashing back down to earth. Perhaps his most famous act was his relentless search for an honest man. He would wander through the crowded streets of Athens in the middle of the day, holding up a lit lantern. When curious onlookers asked what on earth he was doing, he would peer into their faces and say, "I am just looking for an honest man." The implication, of course, was that even with a light in broad daylight, such a person was impossible to find in a society he saw as deeply hypocritical. But don't mistake him for just a court jester or a troublemaker. Behind the outrageous behavior was a sharp, witty mind with a profound message. His teachings, which come down to us through anecdotes and stories, are all about self-sufficiency, what the Greeks called autarkia. He believed in living according to nature, not according to the artificial rules of society. He preached the importance of parrhesia, or speaking truth to power, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. He was a master of the one-liner, and his witty sayings, or kriya, became legendary. And he certainly wasn't afraid to speak truth to the ultimate power. The most famous story about Diogenes involves his encounter with Alexander the Great. By this time, Alexander was the most powerful man in the known world, a conqueror who had nations trembling at his feet. Hearing tales of this strange philosopher, Alexander, intrigued, decided to go and meet him in person. He found Diogenes exactly where you'd expect, lounging in the sun by his barrel in Corinth. Alexander stood before him, surrounded by his generals and soldiers, a figure of immense power and authority. He introduced himself, and impressed by the philosopher's complete lack of possessions, asked magnanimously, "Is there anything I can do for you?" Most people would have begged for gold, for land, for a position of influence. But Diogenes wasn't most people. He simply squinted up at the great conqueror and replied, "Yes, stand out of my light. You're blocking my sun." Alexander's soldiers were shocked, expecting him to be furious at this disrespect. But Alexander was stunned. He was so struck by the philosopher's total indifference to power, fame, and wealth that he turned to his men and said, "But truly, if I were not Alexander, I would like to be Diogenes." This encounter perfectly captures the essence of Diogenes' philosophy. True wealth and power come not from what you have, but from what you don't need. Diogenes lived his entire life as a radical experiment. He chose to be an outsider, a dog, to sniff out and expose the follies and absurdities of his time. He lived to a ripe old age, and even his death is shrouded in legend. One story says he died by holding his breath. Another says he died from an infected dog bite. But the most fitting story is about his burial request. He asked to be thrown outside the city walls for wild animals to feast on, or to be buried face down. When asked why, he supposedly said it was because soon enough, the world would be turned upside down anyway. Today, more than 2,000 years later, Diogenes of Sinope is remembered as one of the most original and provocative figures in the history of philosophy. He founded no formal school, wrote no books, but his life itself was his greatest teaching. He challenges us to look at our own lives, at the things we chase, wealth, status, followers, and ask ourselves, what do we truly need to be happy? What conventions do we follow without question? Diogenes reminds us that sometimes the greatest freedom is found not in gaining more, but in having the courage to live with less.